couple of weeks ago, I told you a very strange story about the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. They're a group of big city politicians and bureaucrats who lobby for more construction money. Well, they sent a letter trying to blackball a construction company from going to a trade show because that construction association dared to say, well, maybe politicians had enough money and we should be more careful on how to spend it. Here's an interview I did a couple of days ago about that blackballing. I actually talked to a former president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who is also a former BC cabinet minister. His name's John Less. Here's our discussion. What's your opinion on the company sending sort of a blacklist letter, and more importantly, on the suggestion that maybe cities already have enough dough?
Well, I think you've been very kind in referring to it as bullying. I think it's thuggery at best. I think it has elements of coercion and perhaps corruption. Whose tune are they dancing to? I think those are fair questions to ask. It's lamentable that FCM has allowed itself to be pushed around like that and to take those kinds of actions in dealing with their sponsors.
Huh. Now, I mean, I understand the idea of cities getting together and saying, well, we could use some help with this bus project or this LRT project, but has the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, taken on a life of its own, maybe like the United Nations now is its own entity? It's maybe not as reflective as its grassroots. Is the FCM sort of a creature of its own? It's got $2/3 of $1 billion in the bank. Whose interests is it really reflecting?
Well, I think an organization like the FCM, when they take large amounts of money from, in this case, the federal government, they have corrupted their mandate. They then no longer in the first place speak out on behalf of their membership. They frankly dance to the tune of those who fund them. And that's true of the FCM and many other organizations. When they are no longer directly and solely responsible to their membership, they've left their mandate behind and they become something else. And I think the FCM membership should take a very close look at that, because I don't think that their interests are being well served when the organ grinder who bears the money calls the tune.
Now, let's talk for a minute about the comments before Parliament that started this kerfuffle that got me interested in this story. Is there a way that cities can spend money smarter? You used to be the mayor of Chilliwack. What advice, I mean, so you've seen it all. You were a provincial cabinet minister. What changes should we make in how cities go about spending billions of dollars on construction?
Well, on capital procurement, I think there are literally tens of billions of dollars to be saved right across the country at all levels of government. For too long in this country, capital procurement means if somebody goes out there and designs something, we then get the lowest bid and we pat ourselves on the back that we've got a good deal for taxpayers. And too often that is not the case. To have a good procurement process, you need to enter into something what I've called design build, and that is, let's have a competitive and innovative look at different ideas that might address the need that a municipality or a provincial government or a federal government has, and let's come forward with the best idea, which might interestingly not even be the lowest cost idea in the short term, but it might be the best value over the long term. It's a complete refusal by governments at all levels to look at that kind of process that lead us to where we are today. We have cost overruns that are typical of any government project pretty well. And I've seen far too many of them. And yet we do not allow people to use innovative technologies, innovative ideas, innovative approaches. We simply always want to go with the status quo and all of the vested interests that are inherent in that.
Well, let me talk about those vested interests. I'm thinking again to this bullying letter that we've been talking about. The company that was blacklisted was a plastic pipe company. They make pipes instead of out of steel or concrete. They make them out of PVC plastic. And that same company was blacklisted from doing business in Montreal when they wouldn't pay a bribe. Is there some sort of internal interest in the FCM or in city halls against that technology, or is that is there, for example, an interest in having pipes that maybe break because then the unions get more business. And I don't know. I mean, is there a reason why this one company seems to be picked on with its new technology, or are they just complaining because they're not getting business?
No, I think this does run very deep. I know in my own experience, having suggested numerous times that people ought to be using more PVC pipe, you automatically get this completely brain-dead response back. No, we've always used ductile iron, and therefore, we're not going to change. But you never get a very well thought-out response to that suggestion at all. There is a lot of evidence that PVC pipe is a perfectly good material to use in our water sewer mains across every North American city. But there are, it would appear, vested interests in the ductile iron pipe industry that has captured, frankly, our entire engineering profession as well. And, these things, they develop over a long period of time. They become part of the status quo, part of what's comfortable to do, part of what people are afraid to step outside of. Interests become very strongly vested, and you try to break out of that, it's very difficult. But I'll tell you what, even that one change going from ductile iron to PVC pipe would save Canadian taxpayers millions and billions of dollars in their water and sewer bills.
That's amazing. Are there any other technologies that have been shut out? I'm thinking of the $500 million green building fund of the FCM, and I'm wondering if that's steering people towards one technology and away from another. Are there other things besides PVC pipe that you think have been shut out of the construction business for cities?
There is no question that there have been. It's hard to specifically put your finger on them, of course, because people are never allowed to advance those ideas. Typically, when a city goes out, to tender, as the terminology is, it's on a very specific approach, a very specific design with very specific materials. In that environment, you are not allowed to bring forward different ideas, a new innovative material or a new innovative approach. That's never called for, and that's exactly the approach that should be taken. They need to specify what the end product is, or the end result is that they need to have addressed, and then allow the private sector to bring forward innovative proposals where, by the way, the private sector remains accountable for their proposal as well, further protecting the taxpayer. I've seen way too many low bids on design bid projects where the proponent, the successful bidder, goes back to the government and says, oh, we forgot something, or we designed something incorrectly, or this material doesn't work. And who picks up the tab? The taxpayer, every time. And it's wrong.
You and I have been talking about some things that I think ordinary Canadians don't often contemplate. I don't think most Canadians have even heard of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities or some of these concepts. I guess in our closing moments, if you had to break this down for an ordinary voter who's interested in lower taxes and getting corruption out of construction business, why is this important for a severely normal Canadian to pay attention to? What changes could there be if we make some of these fixes you're talking about?
Well, if we fix some of these approaches, Ezra, Canadian taxpayers would see the difference in terms of perhaps even a reduction in taxation. We see cities across this country complaining about the pressure on their water and sewer budgets, for example. And yet, in the face of that, they will not try a different material. They will not try a different technology. They will not try a different approach, where it has been shown in other cases they work perfectly fine. And so they're allowing themselves to be beholden to vested interests, whether they be unionized or some other. It is simply wrong. Many governments have forgotten who it is they serve. It's actually, at the end of the day, the taxpayer. And I think the taxpayer, if he took a bit of a look at this, and you're right, a lot of people, they're busy and they don't have time to pay attention to any of this, but if they took a look at this, they would say, you know what? This really deserves to be looked into more deeply.